CURES is sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness from credible sources. I'm Kara Sundlin. We're happy you're here. And according to the 2023 National College Health Assessment, this number might shock you, but approximately 36% of college students have been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. That's diagnosed. 1 in 5 reported that they were experiencing severe psychological issues. Dr. Laura Saunders is a child psychologist here to weigh in on why, and also, of course, what we can do as parents to help. Welcome, doctor.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
You know, I know that we're in the same boat. I have a daughter going off to college. You have a daughter and a son in college. As we think about this, it seems like the numbers are really high. Why are college students so anxious?
Well, I think there's multiple factors that we need to consider. But when I read that statistic, also 36% seemed shocking to me as well. Now, part of me wonders, like, is this like they did an online quiz and they diagnosed themselves, or is this diagnosed from a mental health professional? Even so, even if it's a lesser percentage, it's still quite high that 1 in 5 are reporting, severe psychological distress. So let's, what I want to do is kind of break down some of the stressors.
Yeah.
And then that helps us then look at how you would address each stressor. But I think the most prominent stressor to address is, in fact, the academic stressor. Performing at a high level, time management and organizational skills. And I think that's the factor, a huge factor for a lot of college freshmen, especially, is time management and organization skills, as well as, work volume, learning styles, and some of those other things.
So I think we all struggled with that. I don't know, did it just get worse? Or do they have to do more? Why is it worse now? Or why does it seem like it's worse?
So I think that there are actually so many more distractions now than there were 10 or 20 years ago. I think we joked on Great Day that, to go to the library when I was in college, which was a long time ago, but to go to the library when I was in college, I mean, the only distraction I had was if I decided to put my head down and take a little nap in the, in the carrel.
Right. Or a friend, is at the other table.
Or go talk to a friend, right?
Yeah.
I would find out, I would walk around, see who else was there, see if I had a friend there or an acquaintance. Sometimes I would talk to anyone just for a break. But now there's phones. You could be going to the library, going somewhere to study, and you could be watching a movie, right?
Yeah.
The movie that you haven't finished, the Netflix show you haven't finished. There's so many more distractions. So it requires a greater level of organization and time management than it did, even 10 or 20 years ago.
Right. And what you mean by that is like literally self-policing yourself to turn the phone off. Or I like you, I do remember that, we had different libraries at the University of Michigan. You would go to the undergraduate library if it wasn't that serious, because there are other undergraduates around. And then if you really had to study, you'd go to the graduate library and go up to the stacks and shut the door. And I would tell myself, you're not allowed to come out till you get, this done or something. Nobody was even there. So, but yet I didn't have a phone or anything that could, as long as I was alone, I couldn't be distracted. So what you're saying is they have all of these things going off, ding, 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 all of that. What about just, I don't know, are there other modern day life factors that parents need to understand so we can maybe be a little bit more understanding or empathic about what our college kids are going through?
So that's a great question. I do think that the cost of higher education, right? People, even state schools have a significant expense, but certainly any out-of-state schools or private institutions are very costly. So there's, I think, the concern that you want, ROI, return on investment. So we're investing a lot of money. And there's some people that believe that, you should only go to a college that's in-state or, in your budget. I didn't do that for either of my kids. So they're going to have loans, and I've, contributed a significant amount. But they want return on investment. So there's more pressure, right? There's more pressure to choose a major, and what majors lead to better jobs, and, what area of the country you're going to be in, because that also plays a role. So I think there's just a lot more pressure because it's costly, because you're going to have student loans very often. I mean, I had student loans too. but that you have to be able to then get into a position where you can live on your own, perhaps, unless you're going to live with family. But then there's the pressure to come back and stay with your family for an extended period of time because you might not have the money to pay off loans and other things. So I just think there's all these trickle down pressures that just weren't as prevalent a decade or two ago.
Yeah. So there's also, you mentioned economic pressure, academic pressure, all of the, maybe ramped up anxiety that everyone's sort of feeling these days with all the tension. But what about substance abuse? Is that a bigger issue for college students now?
I think it's a much bigger issue. And interestingly, I work with a lot of young adults, kids in high school, then going off to college, and then often I see them, kind of through college. And I think that what's actually more prevalent is not alcohol use, although I'm not saying there's not alcohol use on college campuses, there absolutely is. But actually it's more marijuana and, what I call pot in my day, or weed use. That is hugely prevalent. I think, I think I did something for Great Day and talked about, 19% of college students say they've used marijuana in the last month. And I said, well, I think 81% were lying. So, the reality is so many of young people are using substances and multiple substances, and marijuana is easy access, especially if you're under 21, even though the law might say 21.
Yeah, and what people don't realize, which is a good point to bring this in, I know you've said it before, but if you're listening right now, and I have certainly tried to get this message to my children who are teenagers now, but people think anxiety, they'll say marijuana, the reason it's legal is it's a plant, it's natural, it can't hurt you. You want to get the message across that's not true.
It is a plant. However, like any substance, anything has side effects or consequences. And I think what happens is that young people, don't have as much life experience, and they're managing stress, sometimes high levels of stress. I'm not even minimizing the amount of stress that they're under. But they think, okay, if I smoke pot every night to go to sleep, it'll just help me relax. But they don't realize that with marijuana often comes rebound anxiety. And so I validate for young people, yes, if you smoke weed or edibles or whatever, however they ingest it, it will in those next moments take away and lower your anxiety level or your stress level. However, it doesn't address the source or the reason for the stress. It just sort of pushes it off. And then you often get rebound anxiety because now you slept, you went to bed super early and you got some rest, although I will say that substances don't actually give you the quality of rest that you think it does. And now that paper that is still due, or, that relationship that you just, were maybe hanging around with that person and you wanted something more and they don't want something more with you. And so that relationship stressor, that doesn't go away. So the sources of the stress don't go away. I understand it reduces it for a while, but you haven't addressed the sources.
Yeah. So also, just on the vein of marijuana, statistics are showing that 1 in 200 people could experience a serious case of psychosis. I think a lot of people have no idea psychosis is linked to cannabis.
Right. So there's a lot of data coming out, and one of the psychiatrists here on this campus, Godfrey Perlson, has actually written a couple of books. He's done a lot of research on marijuana use in young people, and also how we're seeing more and more that those individuals who have some underlying vulnerability towards a thought disorder or psychotic disorder, that marijuana can become a pathway to exacerbate or worsen those symptoms that would be considered, either manic or more psychotic. So, and again, someone could be floating around out there not knowing that they have that underlying vulnerability towards psychosis or psychotic-like thinking until they start engaging in significant marijuana use, and now they've blended right into either delusional beliefs or hallucinations.
So, we've done a great job, I think, of explaining that anxiety is a big problem on college campuses, big problem for college students. There are some different challenges. I think as a mom my child hasn't left yet, but I'm wondering, as a parent, what can we do about this? Because in many cases, the college students are not living with us anymore and theoretically are adults.
Yes. Well, I mean, all college campuses are equipped with college counseling centers. The difficulty there is college counseling centers have actually been tasked with dealing with more and more serious and significant mental illness. So while they were originally, designed to deal with what we consider adjustment problems or relationship problems, of some of the more superficial problems, college counseling centers are actually now addressing more serious. I mean, they're managing individuals with more serious mental illness who are trying to cope and get through their college experience. So unfortunately, college counseling centers are often swamped. So, but it is getting in there. They do often have crisis hours. There are individuals that can help with crisis management. And if necessary, and it appears that you need more long-term, therapy, they generally have a list of referrals of people that are in that community, because license-wise, you need to see someone that's generally in your community.
Okay. The other things that if you have no access to care or perhaps you're not ready to go there yet, we can all encourage really the importance of self-care, which is something that young people really need to learn, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can talk to a therapist, you can take medication, but the reality is then, you have to come back to yourself. So you have to do things to help yourself in a lot of these situations. It might be reducing substance use. It might be practicing more self-care. It might be using grounding techniques or whatever techniques you're learning in therapy, that you use them on a day-to-day basis. You can't just pop a pill every time you have an anxious thought. You have to find ways to manage it, and that is by using skills. It's like replacing negative thoughts, engaging in activities that promote your mental and physical and emotional well-being. So it is active steps, not just talking for an hour a week in therapy or taking a pill.
Okay. So if you think your child is really suffering from anxiety right now, do you let them stay at college or do you need to worry about them coming home or how do you know if you really need to intervene?
So this is a great question, and actually one that I've been asked by parents this week. So, so I looked at the situation and the context. So we are about 5 weeks away from the end of the semester for most colleges. At this point, I would really want to try to patch together whatever kind of plan to get them through the next 5 weeks or so. If this happens on a winter break, that's a different decision. But I would want to put together a plan. Let's focus on what you need to get done today. Where are your grades at? What are your particular stressors? What's actually worsening your anxiety? So let's look at you as the individual, what we need to do to get you through today, which will then get you through tomorrow and get you through the next 5 weeks of this semester. And then maybe make different decisions in the summer about what you want to do. Do you want to take a leave? Do you need to, change colleges? There's all sorts of different decisions to make. Colleges are, by definition, there to help and support you. If you are struggling in a class, go to the professor or go to the teaching assistant. They are there to help you. They'll either direct you to resources, and then that way they know that you're struggling so that you can, they can be a little bit more empathic. It's when you don't connect with the professor and you don't communicate that anything's wrong, and all of a sudden you just should stop showing up to class and stop turning things in. They just think that you're lazy or you don't care, and then your grades will suffer.
Yeah.
So it's empower. The thing I want to get across is you need to empower your young person to advocate for themselves as much as possible. Doesn't mean you don't come in as a parent and support that, but you want to empower them. You cannot call the college professor or email the college professor and say, "Hi, I'm Isabel's mom, and I'm really concerned about her grade in your class." They're not going to respond to you. Even if they do have the ability to respond to you, they're not going to do that because your 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old needs to take that initiative.
Yeah, that is a big change, of course, when we talk about high school students, also letting them grow up, but trying to still be there as the guardrail. So let's talk about symptoms. So maybe you want to discuss this with your teen or your, maybe a 20-year-old if they're in college. What are some of the symptoms that would say, you really are having an anxiety problem, not just experiencing anxiety once in a while?
So I often look at anxiety as being the sister or connected to depression because there's a lot of overlap in symptoms. You know, for anxiety, what we're looking at is excessive worry that's outside the bounds of what would be typical. Now, if you think about it from the context and situationally, the last 5 weeks of a semester, because that's where we are right now, or sometimes the beginning of a semester are the most stressful, right? That's when you're figuring things out or getting assignments. Now you're wrapping up the semester. So understanding the context and what's expected of you. So are you able to function? Are you just, you're managing worry, but you need to maybe get a little bit more sleep or eat a little bit better or, you know, take some breaks and take some walks. You need to do some things to slow down your thinking because you're having racing thoughts or you're having very distracting thoughts. You know, you need to kind of slow down your thinking a little bit. You need to do things to ground yourself. What do I need to do right now? Right. Also, I just go right to cognitive strategies. So, you know, really looking at how that affects you. I mean, you could get symptoms like inability to sleep or excessive sleep. It could affect your eating. You know, you could be so stressed that you're not showering and not taking care of yourself. So it does affect, you know, what we call your activities of daily living or ADLs. So you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're not taking care of yourself. Because the anxieties become so debilitating. And that's where it starts to blend a bit with depression.
Okay. You also, maybe if you're living the college lifestyle that some live, you might not be sleeping and eating and doing the right things as well. And that, on the reverse, I would think could contribute to poor mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We always go after the low-hanging fruit. We always start with, what do you need to do to eat a little bit better or improve your diet a little bit? If you're just eating fast food all day long, you are going to feel crappy about yourself. You know, getting a little bit more sleep or rest. Again, I don't want people sleeping 14 hours a day because that's excessive. And that's a sign that you're really avoiding or you're so depressed that you just can't function. So I don't want to see 14 hours of sleep a day, but if you need to bump up to eight or nine to get yourself a little bit of rest, so deal with the low-hanging fruit, the eating, the sleeping, and the nutrition, and the self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a quick break and listen from one of our sponsors. We'll be back with more on how you can deal with this anxiety, especially if you're trying to help your kids from afar.
Struggling with gambling? Wheeler Health's Better Choice program offers personalized support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit wheelerhealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
Reminded me.
All right, and we're back talking about anxiety in college kids because right now we're seeing statistics show about 36% of kids on college campuses have a diagnosed anxiety disorder. That seems like a big number to me. 1 in 5 also having difficulty coping with their mental health. We're here with Dr. Laura Saunders, a child psychologist from the Institute of Living in Hartford. What about, I know we talked about social pressures. Let me just ask you, is it different for girls versus boys as far as the level of anxiety you're seeing?
So what's different is expectations, right? You know, especially like, you know, your first year or two of college, you're breaking free of the stereotypes that you may have been boxed into in high school. You're looking for that first relationship, or you're looking for just, you know, hookups and no commitments, right? So, I mean, if we're going to go by generalizations, generally, you know, girls often want to do more kind of relationship connecting and something that's more meaningful. Boys tend to want to be more casual and just sort of get experiences and not feel tied down or committed. I mean, those are generalizations. Yeah. But I think it has to do with your expectations. If you're expecting to find the love of your life in college, that's going to be a lot of pressure. And so then you're putting a lot of emotional investment into every connection, and then feeling like it falls short, and then you're going to feel inadequate, and it leads to a whole cascade of negative things.
Right, and that's certainly with romantic relationships too. But I mean, just in general, do you think, is there any evidence of girls or boys have more anxiety? I know sometimes they express differently.
They definitely express it differently. There is slight increases in rates of anxiety in girls, A, because of the way we measure it, but B, because of how they express it, and they're more willing to address it. I think in boys, you might see different symptoms, or they might be a little more likely to turn to substances to manage those symptoms. So now it looks like more like a substance use issue as opposed to like a primary anxiety issue.
Because boys, I know you've said this before, if you're seeing a lot of anger in a boy, that could actually be anxiety coming outward.
Right.
Girls, it
Right.
might
The
be
anger is
turn it
often a
more
mask
inward.
for something that's underneath of it.
Okay. So let me ask you also, if you, a lot of us might have kids who have been on IEPs or 504s, or they learned a little differently. Maybe they have ADHD or dyslexia or something that isn't preventing them from going to college. But college is a whole new world without those supports of high school, your parents, all of that. That I would imagine could drive some anxiety. And what do parents do to help kids who might learn a little differently, but now they're just there with everybody else?
Well, that's a great question, because I think I've seen it sort of go both ways, where parents say, you know what, let's just give you an opportunity to manage this on your own at college. Colleges do this all the time. They often have, first year freshmen often have to take, either a study skills or, introduction to college course where it reviews a lot of these things. And they think, you know what, let's just have you manage it on your own. You didn't seem to use it so much in high school. And some families that say, you know what, let's just contact, and it's called, it could be student services, office of student disability. There's different colleges call different things. As a general rule, I would tell parents that whatever difficulties your child had in high school, whether it was attentional difficulties, organizational difficulties, learning difficulties, whatever difficulties they had in high school, they're going to have them in college. They might even be exacerbated because now there's no one else to be over them and support them, especially if they're living away. So I do think it is in your best interest to contact the university support center, whatever it's called on that campus, to get a plan in place. And that way it's a net if you need it. If you don't need it, that's great. If your maturity takes over and you develop some strategies on your own, that's terrific. But it's there as a net if you need it. So if you need extended time, if you need support in communicating with professors, there's the help and support is available.
Yeah, and I do, as far as I know, I understand from reporting on this over the years that if you do have an IEP or a 504, those accommodations can change. I learned that sometimes in college you're entitled to a note taker or things, but these accommodations do go on to, especially if it's a public university, maybe private universities are a little different, but your accommodations don't just end because you left high school.
Well, and the accommodations are based on skill deficits. So those skill deficits don't necessarily go away. They, we hope that as our young people mature, they develop other strategies, but the skill deficit may not totally go away.
Yeah.
So I think you're better off creating that safety net early. And if your child doesn't need those accommodations, terrific. But if they do, it's there to help them.
Okay, good to know. So we're coming to our final 5 minutes, and I like to give people takeaways. So number one, as parents, because I get it. I mean, my daughter turned 18 and I went to go try and do something at the pediatrician and we can't talk to you. I'm like, what? So, it's kind of a rude awakening for us. And so if you're in college and hopefully you have a good relationship and you can tell, but if you're worried that your child is really struggling with anxiety, what's step one for the parent to do?
Well, step one is an open and direct conversation, right? It's an open and direct conversation about what's going on with them, what symptoms are they experiencing, and how is it impacting them? Have they not left their room? Are they not going to the cafeteria to get food? Have they not been going to class? How is it impacting their functioning? So what's going on? How's it impacting their functioning? Those are the first two steps. From there, then decisions need to be made about, okay, do we just need to get you to the college counseling center? Do we need to get a medication consult? And again, even the college counseling center or medication consult doesn't fix the problem. You still need to do things that are going to be helpful for you. So there's multiple pieces and pathways that you can go down, and generally you need to go down several of them and really break things down into small parts once you figure out what some of the particular stressors are for your young person.
And number two, we know substance use is part of college. A lot of kids are drinking, they're probably smoking pot. Maybe they're doing other things. That's a different conversation. But even in the typical of what we see in movies, and they're going out and partying a lot, right? We see that they're going out several nights a week, maybe at least Friday and Saturday, sometimes more than that. They're sleeping a lot. All these things, their whole life is different. So the conversation that you need to have with them about substance use, because you're probably not going to get very far if you say, don't drink, don't ever do this, don't this. But what you're saying is you want them to recognize that these substances can increase anxiety and depression.
Yes, and again, that's part of the openness. I like to deal in reality. And I know that the drinking age is 21, but let's be real here. College students drink, it's a bigger question about should we reduce the drinking age, but that's a different conversation. The reality is a lot of these college students are using substances. So how is it that it's affecting them? And that means like having some real and direct conversations like, listen, I know you're drinking, or I know you're smoking pot or weed. How is it like really helping you or affecting you? I think often they think it's helping them. It's either helping them socially or helping them with their anxiety. But it's then digging a little deeper and seeing how it might actually be having a negative or rebound effect on their anxiety or energy or emotional well-being.
Okay, and when you really need to seek help, and I know sometimes we might just have to encourage our kids to do this because they're not really kids anymore, but if the anxiety is overwhelming and the bellwether is it preventing you from participating and enjoying in these daily activities?
Yes, I mean, that's, is it hindering your functioning? Are you not able to get to class? Are you not eating meals? Are you not leaving your room? Is it hindering your ability to function? And so that's kind of the, where you draw the line in the sand. When it's hindering your ability to function, then we need bigger help, support, and intervention.
Okay. And above all, in our final minute, you want to learn healthy coping skills. I know you always say the low-hanging fruit, eat a little better and make sure you're getting your sleep, but we all need to learn coping skills. That might be the silver lining. Kids nowadays are actually talking about their feelings and maybe learning more than we ever did.
Yeah, and it really is about practicing self-care, like if listening to music or, playing video games in short spurts, doing things that kind of help you feel they're a distraction, or they ground you, going for walks, exercising. College campuses are filled with gyms and tracks and all sorts of things, walking, you can walk. So doing things that help you feel better about yourself, replacing negative thoughts and cognitive distortions with more positive thoughts. There's all sorts of, online resources around mindfulness and meditation and grounding exercises, things you can do to kind of come back into yourself.
Yeah, lots of resources at school. Let's hope that the kids can take advantage of them and that adults can be aware. Dr. Laura Saunders, always a wealth of information. Thank you for being with us on Kara's Cures again.
Thank you, Kara.
And you can go back on my podcast, listen to more episodes of Dr. Saunders and others with the cutting edge of wellness. Have a great day, everyone, and be well.
CURES, sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.